So please welcome Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I am truly honored that you showed up today to hear me talk, and it is a privilege to be here. And a great intro, Roger. I was hearing your story, and there'll be some direct connections. And if I'd have known you were going to make the social networking joke, I would have worn a different shirt, because I have a shirt that has eagles on it that says social networking on it. So maybe next time. So this is a pretty relaxed talk. I specifically dressed casual today. This is a very casual talk, not very sciencey talk. You see my title here, Lessons in Feathers. So I'll talk a little kind of biology, ecology stuff with a few things here and there, but a lot of it just kind of fun and some things that we maybe can learn from birds. And like Roger said, birding has been a big part of my life. So let's see, a couple math things here. Going on 30 years of my life. So it's been it's kind of like an onion. I think bird watching is and birding. You can just keep peeling layers and get as deep as you want into it. Or it's kind of like golf and bowling, and you can do it as relaxed and casual as you want, and it's still fun as well. So some people I know will have a bird feeder out, or maybe you just notice the robins, and that's the extent of your interest in birds. And then you become like me and get on a variety of boards in different communities and states and lead trips around the country and can go wherever you want. So I know there's a few people in here specifically that have some really deep passions they've gone very deep into that I've seen other talks on. So it's fun to have that, and I feel blessed to have something that means this much to me. And it really has shaped my life tremendously and brought me to where I am today, including living in Jefferson for about 15 years now. So, without further ado, birds are literally everywhere you go. There's an inescapable connection with birds. Whether you're waiting on one of the 45 trains we have going through town and notice the crows that tend to frequent the area, or rock pigeons, or if you're waiting in the grocery store for your spouse and to come out and you notice the house sparrows that are building nests on the building, or frequenting the grills of the cars because it's a free buffet of insects, or if it's a neat national wildlife refuge with 100 species you can see in a day. Whatever it may be, birds are inescapable. So if you want to never be bored again, get into birds. So I assume that because you're here today, you have at least a mild interest in the birds around you. So this is just a quick look at a little bit of the distribution, and it's a very general looking map, but it's kind of color coded to show you where the most diversity of birds are in the world. And you'll notice that very much the middle of the planet, right close to the equator, is where we tend to see the most species of birds. So they're everywhere you go. So no matter where you travel, you're going to see birds. Whether you go to anybody been to the North Pole? Okay. Wow, excellent. So the Arctic tern has the largest migration route in the world, and it flies from the North Pole to the South Pole every year. And they can live up to 30 years long. So if you were to calculate their entire life's journey, pushing 2 million miles traveled in their lifetime. And so these birds weigh maybe 2 pounds. I'd have to look that up. But they weigh basically nothing. As most birds do. Usually we talk about grams or ounces when we talk about the weight of birds. So the fact that they can travel as far as they do, some birds, your local blue jays may not travel very far their entire life, but you have birds that can travel extreme distances every year. And so I think a lot of people get into watching birds because they are pretty, they look neat, but then you start to learn about how they make a living out there, and you just are mind blown. And we continue to learn more and more and more with neat technologies that are out there for tracking bird movement. And so everywhere you go. And one of the first lessons I think birds have to teach us is to surround yourself with good people and have meaningful relationships. And these are green parakeets down in the very south tip of Texas. So this is our only native species of parakeet in the United States. And these are great-tailed grackles, and these are probably European starlings here. But yeah, green parakeets. And so South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley area is a place I've led a few trips. And this is one of the neat things to see. In the evening, they kind of come roost together. They have these evening communal roosts. They make quite a sound when they're flying around too. They're pretty spunky. So green parakeets, yes, very meaningful relationships. That's not all birds are social, but parakeets, parrots, all their cousins, very social. Another social species is the acorn woodpecker. This is a species that you see out west, and this picture is from Oregon area, or Portland, Oregon, I should say. And if you notice that the tree that this bird is on, it's called a granary. And so they will store food as family units and beyond family even. They have basically kind of gangs, if you will. And they defend these granaries that can have hundreds or even more acorns stashed in them. And so they drill these holes out, chisel these holes out just perfect size for acorns to fit into. So maybe you could think of it as a community food bank of sorts, right? So acorn woodpecker. They're a very comical woodpecker. And none of our woodpeckers that we have around here are quite as social. This is a unique one, so this is a very social one. So again, surrounding yourself with good people, all right? And speaking of good people, this is my wife and son and nephew. And so sharing this love you have, of whatever it may be, sharing it. I think birds bring a lot of joy to a lot of people. Has anybody here ever felt joy from hearing or seeing birds? Excellent to hear that. Yeah. So sharing the love, sharing joy with people. It's for all ages. There is kind of a stereotype that it's sort of a retirement activity or retirement age activity, but it really has grown a lot the last 5 to 10 years in all ages. And the use of technology anymore has made it even more inviting, and social media and all that stuff, and with our phones, and we could do a whole talk just on that, but I doesn't like the way I stand right in that spot. And so anyway, sharing the love with people that matter to you. And I am a birding evangelist. I love sharing, and this is why I'm so honored you're here today. I love sharing birds and birding with people. And my wife is not really a birder, but she'd say she's a birder through osmosis. She absorbs a lot more than she realizes, and sometimes it comes out of her mouth around friends, and I think she's caught off guard about how much more she knows than the average Joe. And one of the ways I felt honored to be able to share my love of this is that the Herald has produced a lot of my images the last several years. And so it's always kind of fun to be able to showcase some local things and from afar. The top picture, which we'll see here in a little bit again too, that's from our cemetery actually. It's Merlin. Another thing is you can learn from the past. This is kind of our historical society quick connection here, right? So when you look at, who knows this bird? The roseate spoonbill, yes. This is from roseate spoonbill. Roseate spoonbill. You can see that the spoonbill name comes from the obvious shape of the bill. Uses that to kind of, it has it slightly opened up and it'll swing its head around, and it's very sensitive on that round tip of its bill and grabs any little critter it can find in the water. This is an image from Florida. These are all my images, by the way. Nature photography is a huge passion of mine, and sell my work and try to produce it and do some paintings and things from time. Just started this painting last night over here, if you were wondering what that is, of a resplendent quetzal, which we'll talk more about later. So this is all a huge passion of mine, and an extension of being able to be an environmental educator. And so you look at some birds, and it just looks to me that you can see where they come from. And the more that scientists learn about fossil records, the more sure we are that birds have evolved from dinosaurs. And so there's certain birds I think that you can really see that dinosaur connection to. They show some of that a little bit more. Anyway, this is one of the more phenomenal, spectacularly looking birds that we have out there. Not too many pink birds, especially in North America. And speaking of bright things, sometimes birds remind us that we can be a bright spot for people as well. And sometimes birds are that bright spot for people. And sometimes it's a really simple thing. Maybe it's the cardinals flying through your neighborhood or your backyard, or maybe it's you with a simple compliment to somebody. It can be that bright spot. So cardinals have a lot of symbolism for folks. And, you know, sense of humor is pretty important. And sometimes you just need to be able to laugh at yourself and not take yourselves too seriously. Notice this one? Seems pretty amused. Anyway, I like to tell. I like to pretend that this could be a replication of me and my family. After I've told a joke, and I'm the only one that thinks it's funny. This is my daughter, Poppy. Is that true, Poppy? Pretty accurate. Fair. Yep. Everybody else just puts their head down. And so anyway, not taking ourselves too seriously is sometimes a pretty important thing. But being able to laugh at ourselves. Sometimes you're just gonna have some guts. Have some guts. So you see how I'm doing this? There's some literal connections and some metaphors here, analogies perhaps. This is a turkey vulture. And when I first saw this turkey vulture, I was like, is something caught up on it? You know. Anyway, so after I got a photo of it, I realized that's probably some intestines from its last meal. That's my guess. So vultures have naked heads, right? And that helps them stay cleaner when they are feeding on dead animals. That's all they eat. They're cleaner uppers. And having the red head you see, which is why it gets its name turkey vulture, is similar to a turkey's red head. So that name comes from. And anyway, I've never seen this happen before or after I had this image. So it's kind of a unique situation to see it flying around with that intestine. So sometimes it just takes guts, you know? And can't be afraid to, be proud of yourself and show your worth. And that's what this magnificent frigate bird is doing. This is an image from the Dry Tortugas off the Florida Keys. And so usually this is just kind of a shriveled up little piece of skin in this bird's throat. And this is the male magnificent frigate bird's way of showing how excited he is to see any of the ladies around him and showcase how spectacular he is. And that is his advertisement. This is the first time I had seen hundreds of frigate birds, but I had never seen one with its throat fully inflated. So you see sometimes on some of the National Geographic and Discovery Channel shows where they show them at especially their nesting ground, they're sitting on the ground and they have this inflated and it flutters a little bit even. So birds do some miraculous things and bizarre things to impress one another. So sometimes you got to be able to brag yourself up a little bit, right? But also, sometimes you got to be able to make use of what's around you. And who's been to Jordan Creek Mall before? A lot of us have, okay? So they have water there, Jordan Creek Mall, kind of a little lake, if you will, man-made lake, and stocked with goldfish. Not far from there, who knows what this raptor is? Osprey, very good. So this osprey is one of the parents of a nest not far from here. And about every 20 to 30 minutes, one would come back and would hover above the water, dive down and catch one of these goldfish. And when they're coming back quickly, you know they're feeding young. And these birds are adapted to catch crappie and bass and bullheads, all are native fish that blend in. They can see them from above, and they will dive just like they've been shot. Huge splash. So you can imagine that a goldfish just has to look like a neon flashing light. So, hey, take what life gives you and you take advantage of it sometimes, right? And on that note too, this is a cardinal nest, and this is a barberry bush. If you know your plants at all, barberries are thorny, not very friendly, not native to here. But you know what? It's there, and this family of cardinals decided to try to raise babies there. So sometimes you just got to take what's there. Sometimes it's better than others, but it's kind of like this. You know, we have thistles kind of get a bad name. There are native thistles to Iowa. So anytime you hear the word thistle, don't necessarily thumb your nose at it. You can see this is one of our sulfur butterflies over here. And so who knows one of the birds that loves thistle seeds? That's right. That's right. Goldfinches love thistle seeds. And to clarify too, you get you have the option of feeding a seed that sometimes is called thistle, and it's not truly thistle. It's Niger, N-Y-J-E-R, Niger. So, yeah. And speaking of plants that maybe don't always get the best rap, everybody knows this bird, right? This is our indigo bunting. And this is the poster child for dandelions. The indigo bunting will come to my bird feeders. They will eat black oil sunflower seeds, but most of the time they visit my yard in spring migration. They are on the ground eating the seeds of the dandelions that I have left. So if you want to get cool birds, you gotta have cool plants. And yes, dandelions are a cool plant. I've seen a handful of species feeding on dandelion seeds. And they are an early nectar source, one of the first flowers we have in our area. And they provide an important source of nectar for some of our early emerging insects. Every part of a dandelion is edible and has medicinal value for humans as well. So, here in the next few weeks, they'll be popping up. Maybe you see them with a slightly different eye. And that's a hard sell, I understand. But providing, if you want to increase diversity of birds in your yard, increase native plant diversity, because then you'll have an increase of, not just of vegetation like we're talking about here, but you'll have an increase in native insect diversity. And insect diversity really is the foundation for everything else. Of course, plants technically are. But insect diversity is so huge, and this is why we really talk about minimizing or really being careful about what it is we're spraying in our yards and the fields and everything. Because that really has an impact. And then it isn't just the bugs that you aren't really seeing, it's also all the birds that you are seeing or that not seeing as well. And so another vegetative plant that you could put up is any kind of fruit-bearing plant. Because you know, these birds love fruits. In the summertime, they're insect eaters, but this time of year they can be found on fruit-bearing plants. And yeah, there are native ones which are great, but even the crab apples and stuff, these guys will come and eat. So the cedar waxwing. And so this is a great lesson in perhaps being willing to be adaptive, right? So if you're a bird or if you're any kind of animal and winter's coming, you have the choice to change what your diet is or leave, right? Or you sleep it off. So you have hibernation, migration, or you adapt. And our waxwings are a great example of adapting. And so a lot of the reason we don't have nearly as many species in the wintertime, by and large, is just because we don't have nearly as many bugs. If you're not sure where the name waxwing comes from, it's these little red tips on the ends of the feathers that look like dripped wax. There are 2 species of waxwings in North America. And sometimes, you know, the names can be a little deceiving or unclear. So a little bit of a, you know, in general, diving a little deeper to understand things can be helpful. Another kind of wax, so this is the cedar waxwing. And if you go up a little farther north, we have the Bohemian waxwing. So I took this picture at Ely last winter up in Ely, Minnesota. So one of the main differences is, one of the easiest things to first notice is their butt. So under their tail here, this is orange, a kind of brick red. And in our cedar waxwing, it's more yellow and white. They're also just a little bigger, they're a little grayer, their wing colors are different too. Yeah, so again, we find the food and you will often find the birds. Find the food and find the birds. And then the name is escaping right now. Mountain ash, there we go. American mountain ash. And they're huge red berries, so they're really obvious when you find them. And that's the best place to look for waxwings. Ely, Minnesota. So I've led a bus trip up there. 8 of the last 9 years, and I've been up there another dozen times on my own, and it is a magical area. So who goes north for the winter? Bird watchers do. Birders do. So we see great gray owls and all sorts of stuff, which we'll see again. So sometimes it's a yard. Your yard with you might be a little island. Maybe your neighbors aren't as into stuff. Maybe they just want to mow their yard, but maybe you have some nice plants that attract birds to you. Or maybe it's a small little patch of prairie. And this is a little prairie just off of 141, just southwest of Jamaica. So there's a little stain of prairie there. And you can't see all of them out here where they chisel plowed out here, but there's more of these Swainson's hawks. And Swainson's hawks will migrate through here, and there's two things that really attract them: prairie fires and farmers chisel their fields. You'll see them following right behind. They're catching all the walking wounded of small rodents, especially. These guys will also eat large bugs, but they will go after mice and voles and things that are kind of being disrupted from the ground being chisel plowed. So Swainson's hawks typically live more to the west, and where we are here in kind of west central-ish Iowa, they do venture here each spring. So in the spring, if you are a farmer, if you're driving out around the rural areas and you see a farmer out chisel plowing his field and you see any big birds following around, very likely Swainson's hawks. Red-tailed hawks will join in too, but Swainson's hawks are well known for that. So this is pretty cool. This is only a small portion of the ones that I saw. That there was more flying around, and they're really, really pretty hawk. So small amounts of habitat can matter, right? It can matter. And sometimes that habitat can be in unexpected places. Does anybody like to go for walks in the cemetery, here or elsewhere? Yep. Yeah, it is a nice quiet place for walks. Now we have our nice trail to be able to walk out there too if you wanted to. And so what the cemetery you can see here has a variety of conifers. So it has some big spruce trees. These are probably black spruce, I think. And there's other different type of coniferous trees and bushes at a lot of cemeteries actually. And what happens is, does anybody know this bird? I gave you a clue earlier. It's our small cycodic falcon known as a merlin. And so this is a bird that nests way up in the boreal forests. Well, there's not a lot of spruce trees and things around Iowa, right? And so cemeteries tend to be one of the places that merlins will come spend the winter. Well, they come down here. They'll go out and they hunt small birds and they hunt small rodents during the day. They love catching small birds. And then what happens is, kind of about sunset, they'll come in and they'll land tops of trees, or real conspicuous perches a lot of times, and they'll sit there for 10 minutes, half hour, and then when it gets dark enough, they dive into one of those trees to not be seen the rest of the night, and that's where they sleep. So my guess is it looks a little bit more like Home Sweet Home to where they spend the warmer months, just a guess. And so historically, before we had cemeteries, I'm not sure if these birds would have kept going farther south or exactly what the plan was, but for whatever reason, or maybe they would have used deciduous trees to spend the night. I'm not sure. I mean, we have eastern red cedars and some other things that are native here, but cemeteries, and I only discovered that our cemetery hosts merlins. You can see, even last week I was still seeing at least one merlin spending the winter here. But I've seen 4 at once before. But I first discovered this because in 2018, I was doing something called a big year. Does that term sound familiar to anybody? So that basically is when you're making a conscious effort in one calendar year to see as many species of birds as possible. And I was doing a Greene County big year, which part of it was to challenge myself to get out and explore local areas more. And I was coming into town on Lincoln Way from the east and was going by the cemetery and happened to see a bird up on one of the trees at sunset. And ding! Thought that could be a merlin, sure enough. So ever since then, I've kind of been paying attention to that. The Glendale Cemetery in Des Moines has been known for years and years and years and years and years. So it's not uncommon to have merlins visiting cemeteries. So sometimes, you find joy in unexpected places. Small amounts of habitat can make a difference. And speaking of finding joy in unexpected places, eastern screech owls are very notorious for showing up in funny places. So if you haven't seen a screech owl before, there's a sense of scale for that fire alarm. Screech owls barely bigger than your hand. They can be right in town. They can be out in the country. We just having a conversation before we started about someone heard one in Russell Park. So now I'm going to be paying attention over there. But yeah, they come in, these are both red morph. So clearly red, a lot of times when we say red, like with red-tailed hawk and red morph of the screech owl, it's not as red as, say, that fire alarm, but it has more of a brick red color. But they also come in a gray form as well. And there's no real rhyme or reason. They can be siblings and be red and gray. Excuse me, has everybody heard screech owls before? All right, so I'll do a screech owl for you. If you haven't heard screech owls before, if you hear an owl and you can't quite remember what it is or narrow it down, you can narrow it down quickly by remembering big owls hoot and little owls toot. When we say toot, we mean whistle. For all the fifth graders in there. So, screech owls are something along these lines. There's two parts to them. So it's a trill sound. And then there's a whinny sound too. So that's the screech owl like this. Not very screechy, but they do make some of their weird noises. But those are their main calls. So that's the screech owl. So be listening in your neighborhood for that, because you could have them. They're very adapted to being right in town. So sometimes they sit out in really obvious places, and sometimes it's not quite as obvious. So owl feathers their colorations are extremely camouflage, right? Carter, if you want to come, Poppy's up here, if you want to come up here. And so happens you get here late, Carter, you called out, it's okay. Thanks for coming. So screech owls and most owls have extremely camouflage feathering, very fun. Yep. A lot of a lot of owls have these little feather tufts as well, which have some for camouflage. We think is their main job. And they're like you could see on this picture and the street light, any little cavity they like to kind of sit in. So they can be very tough to see. So sometimes things show up in unexpected places. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes the signs are obvious. So this is our great local connection, history connection here. Where's this? Who knows? 7 Hills, that's right. This is the top of the lift, of the rope lift for the sleds. Yes. And of course an eastern bluebird, right? So sometimes the signs are obvious. Sometimes things happen and it's, you don't quite appreciate the moment. But this picture is a product of an unfortunate event. It's one of my favorite. This is a great gray owl from northern Minnesota, Saxon Bog, north of Duluth. My friend Tom Dunkerton and I went up in 2017 to go. He just moved here from northeast Florida. There's a couple of photos I have with him in Florida, like the roseate spoonbill. And he had just moved to Iowa with his wife and kiddo. And so we took him up here because this is a pretty well-known place to go see these. This is the tallest owl in North America. Pushing the females are pushing 3 feet in height. Females are bigger than males in most all raptors. And it's a very well-known thing, and I even mentioned this ahead of time, that when they plow these rural roads up there, that it's deceivingly narrow because they plow the snow and the road goes like this on the sides, but the plow sticks out and levels it off. But if you put a wheel on there, you go down very quickly and you are stuck instantly. And that happened. So we were kind of walking up and down the road for an hour to entertain ourselves, and sure enough, a great gray owl showed up. And we spent almost an hour watching this particular owl fly around in the snow. It's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but it is snowing. and just phenomenal views. And this particular species of owl in general, like a lot of boreal animals, not too afraid of people. So that was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So, and then we would not have had that experience had he not got his car stuck. Sometimes, making the most of things, and it comes from unexpected places. I made mention maybe earlier of like what's in a name, maybe with the waxwings. Like, what does that mean? So here's something where it's like requiring a little bit more investigation to understand somebody or something. What is in a name? Who knows this bird? Not a meadowlark. It's like if you mixed a meadowlark, it's a really good guess because the front is especially looking meadowlark. If you mix a meadowlark and a sparrow, you get this bird. Dick Sissel. Yes, a very bizarre name, Dick Sissel. Where the heck does that name come from? I've definitely gotten into understanding bird names over the years, and it's always like you always want to kind of understand the origin. And there's a lot of birds that are basically onomatopoeias, named after the noise they make, right? So probably one of the most common ones you would know of is the chickadee. Right? Gets his name from chickadee, chickadee, chickadee. And with the chickadees, they've discovered that the amount of chickas or DDs can vary depending on if there's different threats. If there's a cat walking around, that's going to be a different threat, a ground threat versus an aerial threat like a merlin or a Cooper's hawk or something. So that'll vary. But the Dick Sissel is definitely one of those. And they are a Dick Sissel. Dick Sissel. And they have, this is a grassland species. This is a picture from Dunbar Slough, which we will talk more about Dunbar Slough because, it is a gem. And so these guys will just be incessantly singing in the warm months in any grassland areas if you're lucky. So, Dick Sissel. This is the name. So, looking into people sometimes, there's more than meets the eye. And, and on that line, everybody knows this bird. Yeah, so a ringneck pheasant, not native to here. You know that? It's from China. In fact, they're doing better here than they are in China now. They're introduced here as a game bird. And gosh, in our small community like this, we really talk, and several community leaders here, and many of you are very involved in things here or have been involved over your life. Having partnerships and working with a variety of organizations really is the key. And Pheasants Forever is one of the more successful conservation organizations. I am not a hunter. I like hunting. I support hunting. I don't have issue with people, especially things where it's kind of population control. People going to go hunting for say giraffes and stuff. That's a harder one for me personally to wrap my mind around. But things where we are doing population control of deer and pheasants, and you can have whatever. There's a variety of opinions, and we're not here to debate that today. But Pheasants Forever has been a phenomenal partner with county conservation boards and Ducks Unlimited and a number of them, and they are huge. It's just really interesting to think about. This whole thing started because of one introduced non-native species. Pheasant. And when Pheasants Forever partners with Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation and county conservation boards and the Nature Conservancy and to buy big tracts of land to protect or create habitat, yeah, they're hoping to grow pheasant populations. But the Dick Sissel and hundreds of other species of wildlife benefit from that. So unexpected partnerships sometimes, right? Come from unexpected places. And the pheasant population really varies, yes, a little bit on the weather, but largely habitat. So it's a great conversation to have with people that I may not always cross paths with. I might talk with people who they don't necessarily care about magnificent frigate birds, but they care about pheasants. And so we get to have conversations about protecting your grasslands and your prairies, and maybe you don't have to farm all the way up to your fence. You can leave some of it, and the pheasants will benefit a lot. Those are conversations to have, just some of that awareness. So it's a great success story, and like Roger mentioned, a great lead into this, the bald eagle is a great conservation success story. And like Roger said, in the mid 1900s, it was a real treat to see bald eagles. And I mean, it really, really would be a treat. And the estimates were in the entire lower 48 states in the mid 1900s that there was about 200 nesting pairs. Just in the lower 48. Canada and Alaska have much better habitat up there, so they had more. But in the lower 48, about that. Today, we think there's close to that amount here in Iowa alone. So a huge success story. And I also had a similar experience when I left Ankeny this morning. My folks live in Ankeny, and so I went across by the marina at Sailorville Lake, across Mile Long Bridge, and I just, I'm driving, but always birding. But I was driving and kind of just easily 40 eagles just by the marina, open water, the Mile Long Bridge. It's quite the sight. So, and this winter, we were estimating there's even more around right now for whatever reason. When it gets really cold up north and there's no open water, we see a big influx every winter. Anywhere there's open water here, you're going to see eagles congregating, especially late in the winter like this. They're very opportunistic, which we'll hit on again in a little bit. But I'm sharing you this image because this is my dad actually, and I was honoring him with the opportunity to release this eagle who had been rehabilitated from lead poisoning. And so the reason we had so little eagles in the 1900s, the early 1900s and mid 1900s, had to do with DDT. So maybe some of you remember having DDT around the farm or see it around. And in 1972, DDT was banned. And what was happening is we sprayed DDT for mosquito control. Was really good at that. It worked really well. But it would get into our water system and it would get into the bodies of insects, and then bigger insects would eat them, and small fish. Did I die? Okay, there you go. And so big insects would eat small insects, and then small fish would eat insects, and then big fish would eat small fish, and then eagles would eat fish. And so you have this bioaccumulation of DDT, and when it made its way up to the top of the food chain in the eagles, it was preventing the moms from getting calcium out of their bones to make really strong eggshells. And so when they would sit to incubate, the eggs were not strong enough to withhold the weight of a parent, which is 8 or 9 pounds, maybe 10 pounds on a big eagle. So we don't have new babies being born, you eventually don't have adult eagles either, right? And so banning DDT, should clarify, banning DDT from being used in the United States, we still make it and sell it to other countries. That has made a huge difference in bald eagle populations. So, great conservation success story, and it's easy, we see stuff with climate change, we see stuff here and here, and it's really easy to kind of get a sense of apathy. But I love talking about eagles because what a success story shows we can make a difference if we do a little research, we understand, and it was showing up in human breast milk too, so people were being affected. And this is a great reminder of the indicator the birds are. They're everywhere in the world, every ecosystem has them, and so it can really be an indicator to us if there's something wrong in the environment. And the environment, yes, it's out there, but it's still our home, right? We still need clean air and clean water, and birds really can be an indicator if something's up. Probably going to affect us at some point too. Yeah. That was a very emotional day for me to get to have my dad be able to do that. That was pretty cool. I didn't even get through my introduction of it because I was getting choked up. So, yeah. And so when we learn enough to make these big choices, right? And change is hard and change takes time, but we work with organizations and we work with people maybe we didn't expect to, right? And so, lining up here a bit, it's great to have a diversity of people that we work with. Everybody's got their own tools, like the crossbills. It's the red crossbill. That's not a bill deformity. This is something they evolved to have. And this bill, there's 2 species we have. This is the red. There's also a white winged crossbill. And they have evolved this cool bill to be able to work like pliers. So they take small cones, similar to trees that we were talking about, cemetery. Cemeteries are a place where these birds will show up here in the Midwest. Usually they're way north, but just like here we have some years the crops aren't as good in our crops. Same with cone-bearing plants. Some years the crops aren't as good there. And so you'll see crossbills and other northern species will come south in search of food. So we'll see crossbills at the cemetery, and those little spruce cones are cute little cones. They will pry this open, stick their tongue in there, and pull the seed out. And so you can see where crossbills have been, because a lot of times there'll be cones, they pull the whole cone off, and they're manipulating and eating it, and then it comes up and falls on the ground. So if you see, especially fresh on some snow, you can tell crossbills have probably been there. So everybody's got their own kind of special tools sometimes. You want to utilize those. Same with this bird, got some kind of special tools, right? Black skimmer, yeah, black skimmer. This is one of my pictures with my friend Tom down in Florida. And this is actually a young bird. As it gets a little older, this is probably a first-year bird, it'll be pitch black on the back. And so their bill is not lined up perfectly like a lot of bills are on birds. It's the lower mandible is longer. And so they fly by dragging it into the water, and when they feel a little fish, snap it shut. And every once in a while you'll see a skimmer that's got a busted off bill because it hit something, not a fish. Does happen. So, really, really neat bird. Really long wings that help them to kind of be able to just, without extra flight or without extra wing beats, to be able to do this where they basically just skim the top of the water. It's a really neat bird. So, yes. We don't get these birds here in Iowa. I don't think there's ever been a record of this species. But show of hands, who here has some kind of bird book, a field guide at your house to identify birds? Awesome. So you've seen there's maps, right? Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea where you expect to see stuff. So one thing I love about birds too is the sense of place they give us, and remind us that the political borders don't really matter. Anybody recognize this sign? Not that it's obviously our flag, but this is out of the high school. This is our new high school sign. And bonus, anybody know what kind of bird that is? It's an American kestrel, the most common falcon, similar in size to a merlin that we saw earlier. So yeah, I got to take this picture, an American kestrel on the American flag. So yeah, they remind us that political boundaries, they don't matter. Birds don't care about that. And birds show up in funny places. This is called a western tanager. Who's seen a scarlet tanager or summer tanager here? Yeah, yep, they will be here, but it's western cousin. This is an Ames. Birds don't read those maps. And this is what us bird nerds do. We love being able to see cool stuff, especially when they're pretty like this. Cool. Is this easier to hear? Yeah. I'll keep my voice a little bit more relaxed too. So, the western tanager, yeah, this was in somebody's yard in Ames, and yeah, birds don't read those books. So that's the fun thing about birds. If you're kind of going out specifically looking for birds, it's like a treasure hunt. You're guaranteed to find treasure. You just don't know what it's going to be. So funny stuff shows up in funny places. And this is their normal range map. Kind of gives you an idea where they usually use. So the yellow is kind of where they migrate from Central America, and then the orangish area is more where they settle into nest for the season. You'll notice Iowa's not colored. So yeah. And on that note, there's a couple more fun examples of that. This is called a long-tailed Jaeger. This is the Saylorville Lake, and there's only like 3 or 4 records ever in Iowa. Here's their map. Usually they're on the ocean. And I mentioned my parents live in Ankeny. They just moved there 1 year ago. 1 year ago, almost to the date. And my dad loves sailing. He had a sailboat down in Lake Rathbun all growing up. My grandparents had one, and he had that boat and has since got his own. And has been sailing Lake Rathbun for 40 years. Just moved his sailboat up to Saylorville Lake last year. And I saw that, I knew this bird was being reported there from other bird watchers. And I asked him if he wanted to go out and do birding. So when you go out looking for birds in the ocean, you're going on a pelagic birding trip. So I asked him if he wanted to go on a Saylorville pelagic trip. Take his boat out. We tracked down this long-tailed Jaeger. And everyone else had been taking photos. This bird is largely out in the middle of the lake. mainly. So everyone else's photos were really distant and the bird was small. And when I was sharing this with everybody, they were quite envious. So I was pretty proud of that. Pretty excited. Long-tailed Jaeger. So even here in Greene County, this happens. Woodstock, it's down here. This is Dunbar. So did anybody know this happened when it happened? Did anybody go see that? Yeah. So the story for me when that happened was I had just got done 3 days overnight camp out with 7th and 8th graders. I took the very first bath I had taken in years. And my phone rang, and former Greene County Conservation Director Dan Towers, which I'm sure most of you folks know, called me and said, Matt, I have this bird and it seems, I don't know, it kind of looks like a stork. I looked at my bird book, and it's holding up a book, and it's called a wood ibis, and it's got a long bill, kind of a naked weird head. It might be a young one, I'm not sure. It's the only thing that looks like it. You know, I'm like, all right, Dan, well, if it's possible, I'll get out there and check it out if I can in a little while. And, you know, Dan knows enough to know something was weird, looking, you know, but I also hear from a lot of people about a lot of things that turn out to be really pretty common stuff. So, but you never dismiss people, of course. And if I had not been in Bath and not utterly exhausted, I would have been out the door right away to go confirm or figure out what this was. And so, Bath, took a nap, went out to the Mexican restaurant with my wife, and then I heard another report that Dan had called one of our friends who lives in Ogden, who posted it to it's a listserv where people share rare bird sightings stuff. Confirmed. So I was like, ran out, and it was thunderstorming because it was spring. You can see the rainbows back there, and that thing hung out for, gosh, it was close to 3 weeks, I think. If I remember right? A long time ago. You guys remember? It was about that long. It was a long time. So anyway, it was literally right next to the road. On 250th, which is a blacktop that goes east-west through Dunbar Slough. And Dan's old house, which is now torn down, was just about a mile or two to the east of that intersection. Or up at the next intersection to the east. And so people call like, I'm not seeing it. I said, you're looking too far. There's literally down what would be essentially a flooded ditch. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel for it, because there's a lot of little bullheads that were in this little flooded spot right next to the road. I have video of it, eating bullheads and stuff, and it's just like right there. So pretty awesome. And this is something like, somebody can correct me, I want to say it's only like the 3rd record ever in history of Iowa that this bird showed up. 15 minutes from home. In Dunbar Slough, man, again, what a treasure. So we got it out in the news, let folks know. And yeah, pretty fun. So again, you can see the home range here usually, right? Year-round resident in Florida and further south, much further south. It will overwinter kind of in the Gulf states and beyond. But sporadically they show up throughout the U.S. So, this particular picture is, I'll just let you look at it a second, maybe figure out what story could be told. Well, it sure seems like, we all, if we've been around long enough to know that geese can have real attitude issues. And it looks like this goose has an attitude issue, and that this painted turtle is like, hey man, I'm just chilling here, you know? Oh, sorry. And this goose had nothing, when it was not at all involved with the painted turtle, and and it looks like it's got some like ferocious teeth and everything, but it's got some mud in its bill. So it gives us this image of much worse than it really is, right? But freezing a moment in time can be kind of deceiving. And so, a couple things to show you on this map. Again, birds remind us that we are all one. We are all one planet. We are all one unit as a species living on this spinning rock. And they don't care about any of these names or numbers that are on here, right? Or any of these lines. And so remember, here's Costa Rica. We can talk about that later. And then this box right down here in the Rio Grande Valley. A couple things to show you. So McAllen is in Harlingen are two towns that people often fly into when they go down here. This squiggly line is the Rio Grande Valley, which is the border between the United States and Mexico. So clearly that's been in the news a lot the last several years, hasn't it? Birds don't care about any of that junk. They care if there's a giant wall in their way. They care about that. Most of them can fly over. Some birds are more ground-oriented, though, and ocelots and other things that can't fly care about that stuff. But one more plant. Roma, keep this in mind up here, Roma, okay. The upper Rio Grande Valley. So I want to show you this. This is our national bird, right? This is Mexico's national bird. Who knows? Crescent caracara, yeah. Some people, so crescent caracara nickname is the Mexican eagle. So, pretty charismatic birds, right? Yeah, sometimes, not always. Sometimes, so fair warning, there's guts in the next picture, just fair warning. Not always pretty, sometimes, is it? Not always pretty. We put our best foot forward when we can, but sometimes. So here's a caracara. This is at the Brownsville dump. Brownsville is not on our map labeled, but Brownsville is right down here. And the Brownsville dump is actually a pretty famous birding place. There's a species called the Tamaulipas crow, which is named for a state down in Mexico. And it doesn't go hardly anywhere else in the United States, but it will show up to scavenge with Chihuahua ravens and crescent caracara things at the Brownsville dump. So they have birders coming there, and they know they just sign into their little station. You're not weighing yourself, but you're saying, I'm here to go bird watching. And they kind of show you where it's okay to go. So this is a picture of something that's been scavenging out at the Brownsville dump. And then we have our probably a 4th year bald eagle. It takes them 5 years to get the white head and tail. Right? And so this is a raccoon about this time of year. So again, opportunity, when you see it, you take it. I'll get off that slide. And so looking from Roma, we're looking out at the mountains in Mexico. Beautiful, peaceful scene. You have this great egret flying in front of you along the border of Mexico and the United States. Flying down the Rio Grande Valley to go find a roosting spot for the night. So it's very interesting taking people there, seeing some amazing birds that literally only can be found in the Rio Grande Valley in the United States because it's kind of subtropical there. We'll see a couple of those birds here in a second. But seeing all of everything that's been happening there in real life. We were just there in November, and we've been there many times, and every time we've been there the last few years, everything's looking different. There's new structures and things showing up places. So it's when you visit places versus seeing them on the news, it really hits you differently, and it really gives you some different perspectives. Again, part of what I love about birds, they're taking me places I would have never been. And they also open our eyes to other things besides birds, things like dragonflies. So you've seen 2 creatures with the name roseate in them. This is a dragonfly that you only see in warmer states. This is the roseate skimmer, pinks and purples. You don't see those colors too many places in nature. A few birds, but yeah, the roseate skimmer. Has anybody over here ever taken an interest in dragonflies? It's just like this. A lot of birders will like say in July and August the birding really slows down here, so we start paying attention to dragonflies and damselflies. Yeah. All right. So another fun treat is the green jay. Yeah. Has anybody ever got to go down and see green jays in person? Would anybody like to go see green jays in person? I'm going to lead some more trips down there. In fact, the next chapter of my life is getting ready to start, and I definitely want to include a lot more leading trips, places like this. So keep that in mind. Another, we saw green parakeets. Another species, this is the red-crowned parrot, a very social species. And what happens is they'll fly around all during the day, and then they get together in the evenings. And what a sight and sound they are. They'll be well over 100 in some of these evening roosts. And you all heard of parrots before. If you've ever been to a pet store and you just keep going. And they're all talking at once. Yeah. I have this thing where, personally, where I love trying to get pictures of birds in front of the moon. I've seen a couple of pictures like that now. So I made it this term so ornithology is the study of birds and astronomy is the study of the night sky, right? So ornithostronomy. I try to take ornithostronomy pictures sometimes. So thinking of the night sky and thinking of things that are up above us. This is a radar, and only a little bit of that's rain. So this green stuff here, this is rain, and this is probably rain. These, mostly birds migrating. So starting here, probably almost now, when the sun goes down, a lot of birds start to migrate. And what happens is, and there's a reason they're in these circles because these are the radar loops, and this is as far out as they go. But there's enough biomass from birds picking up for the night to head north, and the radar picks it up. And so people will tune in after dark to see when birds are moving. And one of the neat things is, on some nights, if the conditions are correct, you'll see, usually the radar loop is a couple hours, right? So if you time it just right, what you'll see is it'll be completely empty, and then it'll start to it'll just explode from here, and it'll work its way up to the west. Why is that? As the sun is going down across the country, that's right. And so you'll see the timing of it. They're picking up, they're picking up, they're picking up, they're picking up. So when you put it on a loop, you can just see it explode from east to west. And then you'll see sometimes there'll be big fronts, like last night we had this big fronts. There'll be a distinct wind difference on either side. So you'll see the radar will be all busy down here, and it'll be completely quiet up here because you have south winds, and they're not going to, north winds, they're not going to fight that headwind. Phenomenal stuff. I love migration, and I could talk hours on end about migration itself. So speaking of migration, in the sense of place, everybody knows this bird, right? Who puts out food to try to get the Orioles at your house? Grape jelly and oranges. Yeah, that's a great way to go. Anybody else put anything else out they like? Any other successful feeding endeavors? So if you want to try to attract Orioles into your yard, put your food out probably the last week of April. But they really, maybe even middle April if you're getting anxious. And that between mid-April and through mid-May is when they'll start really coming gangbusters. The first 2 weeks of May are the most diverse time for birds here in Iowa because we have a ton of stuff migrating through. We've already been seeing, Roger mentioned the robins, and then we have the red-winged blackbirds are starting to show up. The geese are starting to show up, and the ducks are starting to show up. Those are our earliest migrants. And so it's a great sign, even if you didn't have a calendar, you know spring was right around the corner thanks to birds. Right? They give that little sense of hope that change is on the way. Now, if we want to keep seeing Baltimore Orioles coming to our yards, into our parks here, this lesson is that the Baltimore Orioles lesson for us is that everyday choices can make a difference. Who likes coffee? A lot of people coffee today. Who's a coffee drinker? I'm curious what percentage of us. A good chunk of us, okay. So, and I'll even give Rich a free plug for Green Bean because some of his coffee, I believe, fits the bill of what I'm about to describe. So a lot of coffee has been manipulated to grow out in the full sun. They clear rainforest because more sun means they can grow more beans. Coffee naturally is an understory plant. It doesn't want to be in the sun. So, like a lot of our crops, we have made really efficient and changed them to do what we want. They did that with coffee as well. But that also has a huge negative consequence on the environment, right? Clear-cutting rainforest, clearly not the best. Shade-grown coffee is the term for you. Shade-grown coffee. And so this is a picture of a place actually my wife Tony and I visited when we went to Costa Rica. And it's a shade-grown coffee plantation. And so they are growing coffee in the understory of native rainforest trees. And there's a huge kind of spectrum of how it's done, but in general, yeah. And they have tours, and they even have bird watching tours. This place was, they had upwards of 160 species of birds they identified around their plantation. It was really neat. Because I talk about this often, So to get to see it in person was very fun. So think about where your coffee comes from. You can talk to Rich about where his coffee comes from. And we might get a display about shade-grown coffee, put up a green bean coffee one of these days. So if it doesn't say shade-grown, it probably isn't. But a lot of places will probably show that when it is. All right. So all those choices can make a difference, right? All right. Well, another Costa Rica bird for you. So our lesson from the red-legged honey creeper is keep your eyes open out there. This is in the parking lot of our hotel. What a magical bird, right? Look at those colors. Yeah. So keep your eyes open out there. Now, this bird is a slaty flower piercer. Flower piercer. Look at that hooked bill. Flowers not a fan of this bird. They cheat the system. You know, sometimes shortcuts are okay. Sometimes shortcuts are okay. Work smarter, not harder always, right? Or smarter before you work harder even, all right? So what happens is this bird shortcuts the pollination process. They're after the nectar that flowers offer, but they go in down here to get it. And there was so this is the patio of a place we stayed in Costa Rica up in the mountains. There's a neat little patio, look out the mountains, awesome. And homemade breakfast and other meals when we were there. And then the flower piercers would come up, and there's a whole vine of these flowers that it loved. There's little holes all over the base of these flowers. So it's cheating the system. You know, normally a hummingbird or a butterfly is going up, landing in that flower, sticking its face down in there, getting the goods, and also getting a face and belly full of pollen, right? Spreading that around. Well, and there are some flowers, it's this cat and mouse thing. Everything in nature is this cat and mouse, and who's going to evolve faster to get what they want. So some flowers are making it a little more difficult of not providing such an easy opportunity for these. But there's a few different kind of flower piercers. This is the slaty flower piercer. So work smarter before harder, right? Work in the right angles sometimes. This is on that same patio. And this is called a lesser violet ear. Lesser violet ear. And I guess my lesson for this is to feed your soul. Often. Often. If you ever had hummingbird feeders up, you know they're there often. Or if you have flowers out, even better, they're there often. They have such a high metabolism that at night they have to shut their body most of the way off. If they didn't, they'd starve. It's called torpor. Torpor. So maybe a new Scrabble word for you. Torpor. So if you found a hummingbird that was in torpor early one morning, you could literally just go pick it up. Because it's, you imagine a dial, it's most of the way off. It takes them a little while to pick back up. So they are constantly feeding. The nectar on flowers is good, but having insects is even more important, especially when they're feeding their babies. So feed your soul often. And that's what my wife and I did when she finished her master's degree. We went to Costa Rica to celebrate, feed the souls, and look for this bird especially. This is the resplendent quetzal. This is the painting I started last night, was the quetzal. One of the more highly sought after birds in the world. This image, I've looked around at a lot of quetzal images. And this one I've never seen anybody get one like that, so I'm pretty excited about that. This bird is, again, talk about being proud of yourself and showing your worth. This is the male quetzal doing that. So he flew way high up and just sallied down and just really showing off his big tail feathers. That's really what that whole thing is about right there. And so before this trip, I had no tattoos. And my wife has had a few tattoos, which is kind of fun, you know, like, hey mom, this is somebody I'm interested in. And my mom's like, tattoos, huh? Because none of us had tattoos in our house. And I have 2 tattoos because of this trip now. And so one of them is based on that photo. And this is my wife's wrist and my forearm, right here. And so the saying of Costa Rica is "Pura vida," which literally from Spanish translates to the pure life. But I love this little ditty about it. It kind of sort of defines it as to live a peaceful, simple, uncluttered life with a deep appreciation for nature, family, and friends. A real living that reflects happiness, well-being, conformity, and satisfaction. And the native folks of Costa Rica will say this phrase often. And it was kind of like a greeting or a, seize the day or no worries. It's kind of universally spoken. So pura vida. Anybody have been to Costa Rica before? Pura vida, yes, yes. The other tattoo we can talk about some other time, but it's a handprint of a monkey that slapped my calf. So if we have time with Andy, you want to hear that, but we'll do that. All right, so the last thing, getting here to the end, follow your heart, right? Follow my heart has brought me to you today. The top right picture is from our wedding day. We got married at White Rock Conservancy. Has anybody been to White Rock Conservancy by Coon Rapids? Who's heard of White Rock Conservancy? Okay. It is another gem. A half hour from home. Great hiking. If you're interested in kayaking or canoeing, it's great. Or just walking, horseback riding, camping. It's a really, really neat ecological spot. And we got married there. And months leading up to it, my friends and family all thought, Matt, you can't pay attention to birds during your wedding. And my wife did say, I'm holding you responsible for whatever you agreed to, regardless if you're paying attention. The night before, while we were doing our walkthrough, we were practicing what we'd say as we put the ring on one another's fingers. And as she's holding my hand and telling me this, a barred owl flies behind her with food in its mouth. So I'm sitting there, barred owl! Everyone's like, oh, I knew this. Yeah, so during the wedding, we were kind of at a very sentimental point. And I did hear a Baltimore, we got married in May. I heard a Baltimore Oriole singing, and it was during when the Chad Elliott was singing a song. And so I kind of whispered to her, Baltimore Oriole, to kind of break the mood a second there. So, yeah. So I had friends. We had a chalkboard. People would write down any bird sightings they had. And one of my retired biologist friends from the DNR had a whole list of birds during the ceremony. Apparently, an eagle flew over. Good omen, right? I have to say, photo credit to Chuck Offenberger here in this lower left picture. As I saw you had captioned that Matt orchestrating, and it took me a second. I thought, yeah, that's pretty fun. It does look like we're orchestrating there. So this is a field trip we led out at Dunbar Slough, and we had a good number of folks show up there, and saw lots of cool birds. The lower right picture's in Costa Rica. Feeling very alive in that moment, right? Feeling very alive. And then, does anybody recognize where this is? It's within about a half hour of here. It is, it's Ledges, yes. Very good, it's Ledges on the Lost Lake Trail. Yes. So, follow your heart. Good things will come. Sometimes they come right to you. This is on one of the trips we went down to South Florida. And this is the only indigenous species of bird in Florida. This is the Florida scrub jay. So we were at a place we knew they should be seen, and I was watching one kind of out in the distance, flying around some shrubs, and then it flew down to the ground a little bit, and then it took off flying right towards me, and I was like, and then it landed on me. So the lower right picture is from my cell phone. I actually did a little phone video. I was talking like, what's going on, guys? So this is one of our participants said that's pretty weird. You can see the bird is banded. So they do a lot of research to keep good track of these birds because it's an endangered species down there, or at least threatened species. And so our understanding of birds, we used to do this where you catch them in these special nets, you put a little metal band on their leg, and you hope that somebody somewhere catches it again. The return rate is like 1%. For birds that are waterfowl or you have hunting going on, it's a little higher because you have harvesting of birds. But at songbirds and other things, it's really small. So we would learn about distribution. That's how we've learned about distribution until the last several years. And now we have this amazing technology, little tiny tracking devices that work off of cell phone towers is one of the ways. And so our understanding of bird distribution and movement is just going up quickly. There's a species of godwit, which is a type of shorebird, and we know that it migrated for 8 days straight over the ocean to get from one place to another. 8 days straight of flying. those frigate birds will fly days on end too. So our understanding of this, it just continues to grow, and my awestruckness continues to grow as well. And what I love also about the art of birds and the art of nature is that we all feel something different, right? Clearly this is kind of a fun reaction, right? This is an easy one to laugh at and pretty neat. But art is a gift as well, and there's tons of art to be found in nature. And this is my last slide. This picture, there's birds in it. Those are Franklin's gulls right after a big storm. Kind of like the event we had yesterday. I was down in the Ankeny area, which was much scarier, I think, than you had to deal with here. But there was some bonkers looking skies like this purple. And right after that big front went through one day on one fall, you can tell it's autumn with the tree color. There was thousands of Franklin's gulls following right behind the draft of this storm. And so I had a friend. It's just funny that how people come and go out of your life, and so many people have been brought into my life through my involvement with birding and nature photography and things. I grew up in Fairfield, Iowa, and Mount Pleasant was a rival of ours in sports. And there's a guy named Mike Heaton who we stayed in contact with. We kind of became friends and friends of friends and things. But anyway, his wife reached out to me before Christmas time and said she wanted to order this print of this image because Mike had noticed it on my Facebook page and he wanted it. And so I had a big, so for example, this is a print on metal, right? So it's printed on metal. So this is one of my images, just the way you can do this, or canvases, or prints to frame, whatever. So she ordered him this print, or this picture, I mean, on metal. And I was really kind of caught off guard because I thought, of all my images, this isn't in my top 100 of ones I would expect people to want. I don't like it, but it doesn't knock my socks off or anything. It's kind of got a fun story, knowing the storm and whatever. And so they were on their way to Colorado for a family Christmas. It was the 23rd of December, and she asked if I could meet up with them down at I-35. And I said, does he know what's going on? No, he knows that we're meeting for his Christmas present, but he doesn't know what's about. And so I pull into the Casey's, and I see him at the very other end, and he's like, she said it's coming from Jefferson. I know 2 people from Jefferson, and she said we're looking for a black Prius. And the other person that wouldn't be driving a black Prius. I knew it had to be you. We hadn't seen each other for a very long time, so that was very cool. And when they returned home, and he had the picture on his wall, he took a picture of it and explained why he picked this picture. He has lived in Des Moines, he's lived in Colorado, he's lived in Texas, and he's back in Mount Pleasant, back where he grew up, and is very much into economic development down there, which we can all appreciate here. We are considering ourselves, growing and progressive here. And this is what he said. I love this photo because it symbolizes how I see rural entrepreneurship. Rarely does rural business ever disrupt an industry. We aren't the storm, however, we have a long history of riding the tailwinds of those that do disrupt markets. We build new businesses that are supported by the disrupting ones. We take advantage of the winds of change. It's a little different perspective on entrepreneurship and a very beautiful photo.
Cool.
Wow! What power does art have, and nature, and just brings out something in everybody, and maybe it's different than everybody else. So, on that note, thank you so much again for having me today, and I am certainly happy to answer any number of questions, or I'll hang around if you're too shy to ask them. Yes, sir.
3 quick questions.
Yes.
Since it is a historical society,
yes.
What bird are we no longer having here that you really miss because of the way things have evolved or whatever? What bird is historically just not here anymore that was here or was common at some point? Sure.
So the question, if you didn't hear, was what is a bird that we would have had here historically that we don't have here anymore? One that comes to mind is prairie chickens. Has everybody ever seen prairie chicken before? Even when you're, yeah, okay. So we have one place in Iowa they've been reintroduced, down in Decatur County, I think it is. And that would have historically been a prairie chicken.
Did it pop up?
They puff their necks up, they stick their head feathers up, their tails up. Kind of think of a mini turkey in a sense. And they do this dance, and boom, 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 boom. You can go over to central Nebraska and see the sandhill cranes. You can also see the prairie chickens dancing. So that would have been a neat bird to see for sure.
Why did you describe the merlin at the cemetery as a small psychotic falcon?
That sounds like a direct quote. Yeah. A small psychotic falcon. Why did I describe that? Because they don't care. And they know that they're speedy enough to escape anything and everything. And you'll see them on migration, you'll see them coming in, and maybe there's a red-tailed hawk flying, or maybe there's one sitting, or maybe there's a crow sitting or flying. And they'll come by and they'll just go like ding, and just hit it because they can. And they're very high, strong, very high energy. Yeah.
Okay, the third question I'm going to address with Ms. Poppy.
Yes.
What of all of his bird calls that he can do, what is the oddest or funniest one he does that he could do for us here today?
The question, I'll give you a second to think. So the question is asking my daughter is, what's the funniest, silliest bird call that she has heard me do that I'd like to do today? Put me on the spot.
It's probably like, I can't exactly remember the name, but it's some type of owl, and it's just, it embarrasses me.
It embarrasses her. So
Perfect.
Perfect. My guess is you're talking about a barred owl and they do the monkey call. So I'll do it and you tell me if this is the one you're thinking of. So the barred owl is a name for, it gets often miscalled as a barn owl because it sounds similar. But barn owls are an endangered species here in Iowa, and they're very hard to see. And they're the one owl that doesn't fit the big owls, little owls too. They are a screaming owl. I'm not going to do that one. But if you have an outbuilding somewhere, you live out in the country, or you hear what sounds like a woman being murdered from it, you should probably go check it out. Either way, but you might have a barn owl. So the barred owl, named for the barring, the stripes on their feathers, says who cooks for you, or who cooks for you all. That's their standard thing. So it's a so that's kind of their standard thing. But if two of them are talking, they get a little wound up. They can do what's called the monkey call, and it goes like this. So they'll start out. Is that it, Bobby? Okay. Good question, It does sound very monkey-like, yeah. What other questions do you have? Yes, sir.
I have two questions.
Okay.
Watching birds out the window in a very cold day, I look and I say, how do they survive when it's when it's 0 or below?
Yes.
And everything, you think, if I was out there, I'd be...
Isn't it incredible? So the question, if you didn't hear, is how do birds survive these insanely cold conditions, right? How do they make it through the winter? So it really is impressive, and especially the birds we're seeing when we go to northern Minnesota in the winter, and that's their home sweet home. Yeah. So for one, birds' body temperatures start off high. They're higher than ours by a few degrees. They have a high metabolism. And they're eating a lot to maintain that metabolism. But don't ever underestimate the power of feathers. Kind of the underlying, I guess, message of our talk today, right? The power of feathers. It is. They have two layers, really. They have that down layer, and then the contour feathers that you see on the outside. So the outside feathers work like a rain jacket, and they keep the moisture off the body. The inside is like sweatshirts and long underwear and stuff. So that's it. They also, they depending on what kind of bird it is, but they oftentimes will fluff their feathers up too. Have you seen that happen? So they're creating little pockets of warm air by doing that. So when you see a fluffed up bird, that is a warming behavior.
Is their heart rate faster in the wintertime?
I don't know about that. I don't know for sure if it's any different in the wintertime. The faster your metabolism is, the more fuel you're burning, and so you have to find more food. So it would make sense, it could even be the other direction, but I'm not 100% sure about that. What was your second question?
My other question was, I was watching a group of geese, or a flock of geese, fly north, and I got to thinking about the speed that birds fly. And I thought, how fast are those geese going anyway?
Right.
And the other thing is watching hummingbirds. They dart like crazy. And how, has anybody measured the speed that they can get up to in a short time?
Yes, and I don't remember all the stats, but that's an easy Google search. Speed of a ruby-throated hummingbird, and also two other things. Look up their heart rate and how fast their wing beats are, because it's like dozens per second, wing beats per second. I can't remember the number, but yeah, it's incredible. And so distance flying, that's why they oftentimes wait for south wind days to go. And right, and all of it is just a lot to wrap your mind around. Yeah.
But in terms of the geese, do you have a guess or an estimate as to do they 40, 50 miles an hour or less than that?
I don't know about that. I don't know what their typical cruising speed is. I don't know that off the top of my head. No, but yeah.
The other thing about geese is we go to northern Minnesota or in the summer times, and it seems like the geese population, and even around here, has just multiplied.
Yes,
over the years.
Canada geese are there's a handful of species of birds that have benefited from human encroachment and habitat destruction, because we've recreated some neat little spots they like all the little suburb makes ponds and everything. But along those lines, they're one of the few species that have done better. Yes. They love mowed grass. They love that. So those are all things that are helpful to them. I'm sure you know the answer to this, but when you see one of those flocks of geese, usually it's a V, right? You know one side of the V is longer than the other, correct?
Right.
Why? There's more geese on that side.
That's right.
I'm not sure somebody's going to say. But you hear them honking too, right? You hear geese honking a lot. It's kind of like cars. They're like, watch out, watch out. Sometimes they do run into each other. You know what happens? They get goosebumps. All right. Somebody else have a question before I go say anything else like that? I'll stick around. I'm sure you have. Yes.
So when you do birding trips, is that advertised through the conservation district or?
Good question, because it's going to be a little different now. But look for local media, I would say. Look through local media. And are you a social media user? Some? Okay. So follow any of the local conservation groups, but also just local media. So a lot of times when we do it, it goes through like the different Facebook groups, or there's an email listserv to the Iowa Ornithologists Union that's free to sign up. And basically, anytime somebody submits an email, says, hey, there's, right now there's emails coming because people are seeing all the new stuff showing up. So you get that in your inbox, and you can, keep my eyes open. And I know red-winged blackbird just showing up, or now I know the juncos are showing up. It's just like in the late fall, you're like, oh, winter's around the corner. So stuff like that kind of helps you. But those are ways we tend to get it out. But I'd say local media will make a point for that too for any upcoming trips. Okay. Thanks for asking. Yes, sir.
I couldn't help but think how wonderful a God we got to provide all of these different birds
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
and creatures for us to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Pretty awesome. So we think there's about 10,000 in the world. 10,000 species of birds.
Wow.
And we keep learning more about genetics. So that number's going to keep growing, I think. Yeah. Yes. Did you have a question?
Yeah, we feed the birds at our house, and we have a Cooper's hawk that comes. And it's either, it seems to come practically every day. It's either in our yard or a neighbor's yard. And I feel like I'm running a cafeteria. I mean, should I keep feeding the birds? I've always wondered, I've always felt kind of guilty.
I know. So her question is, one I get often is, we have a Cooper's hawk and it's eating bird feeder birds, right?
Yeah.
So Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks are in the accipiter family, and they're primarily feeding on other birds, yes. And so sometimes we get really angry phone calls about that happening. I'm like, well, you wanted a bird feeder, right? So the only real way to kind of probably get to move on is take your bird feeders down for a little bit, so those birds won't be, it's like you're just putting out a little buffet at that point for it, you know, kind of easy pickings. Is it a young one or an adult, do you know? Brown
The one right now is
streaking? Or?
pretty adult.
Yeah, it's got the slate blue or gray and then orange in the front versus brown and white, yeah. So, yeah, the only real way to kind of discourage it is to just take your bird feeders down for a little bit and encourage the birds to go elsewhere. That's about it. It's really about it. I think it's fun. I would love to be able to train them to go after house sparrows and starlings only, but it doesn't always work that way.
How common are Cooper's hawks?
How common? Pretty common overall. Pretty common. They're not always easy to see because they're kind of a woodland species, you know, shorter wings and long tail. But usually they're seen in town or any yards hunting bird feeders, if anything. But they're pretty common overall. I mean, common is relative, I suppose. So are they around versus are they being seen? You know, like there's probably a lot more owls than we realize too. They're just you don't see them. So I would say the angel would be fairly common.
I'd almost keep my feeder up just to keep feeding them.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, they're pretty. I'm with you. I love watching predator-prey relationships. I think that's pretty cool. Watching nature do its thing. Yeah. It's not for everybody. I can appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Pileated woodpecker.
Yes.
Have you seen one in Greene County?
Yes, I have, and it was just a couple years ago when we did a Christmas bird count. You haven't heard of that? It happened between December 15th and January 5th. For the 100 and what year is this? 122 years now? 1900 was started by the Audubon Society. And so we've been doing what's called, we're calling it our Dunbar Slough bird count, which is Dunbar Slough into the east, which just gets the cemetery in on the eastern part of the count circle. And we learned that so if you're taking the bridge to head out to Deal's Orchard, and you go if you peel off and take the gravel to the north, and the river area there, that forest has been a good spot to see pileated woodpeckers. I almost included a photo from that spot, yeah. And sometimes hearing them, like most birds, you go outside, you hear birds far more often than you see them, right? So learning their sounds is, we didn't do any, this wasn't a how to ID birds talk today, but learning sounds can be very helpful.
Can you do that?
The pileated woodpecker? Sure. So you'll hear pileated or pileated, or some mix of that. I say pileated too. Name for I think pileation, I think is the word for the big red crest. And it sounds kind of gets laughing. So if you may have seen or heard of a northern flicker, which is another kind of woodpecker, and when they migrate through in the spring, they'll be on the ground with the robins feeding a lot. And they kind of sound similar. So it's a and it can be real stable or stay on a flat line of tone. The pileated is a little more, it's like that, but it varies a little bit. So listen for that. Okay, that's that.
So Matt,
Yes,
don't they drum also on the tree?
Yes, yep, drumming, and sometimes there's some woodpeckers that can be identified a little bit by that too, like hairy woodpeckers sound a lot like they're snoring. It's like a snoring sound almost when they drum. Yeah, so when you hear drumming, that's a woodpecker's, one of their advertisements, one of their versions of singing. So if you just hear a random tapping, that's a woodpecker that's looking for food or excavating a home. But if you hear the real rhythmic brrr, brrr, that's it. It's trying to just sound as loud and fancy as it can be. That's the drumming. Yeah. Yes?
I've seen one at our old house out by the golf course.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah,
that
they sing in the river corridor.
Yeah, the ravine that
Yeah,
comes from the river.
the riparian area, that's perfect. That makes total sense. Just not very far from there as far as the bird flies, right? Cool. Thanks for letting me know. I'll definitely keep my eyes open out there. And there's an eagle nest out by the golf course if you aren't aware of that too. You can see from the cart shed area. So that's pretty cool. They should, I haven't been down there. Is anybody lately? They should be on the nest right now. They're our earliest nesting species in the state right now, the bald eagles. So you're seeing resident bald eagles, but the majority of what you're seeing out there right now are migrants that will be heading north as the weather turns here. Cool. I will stick around because I'm sure that some other questions or comments that are waiting. And again, thank you so much for having me here today and come out and listen to my rambling. And if you are interested in any upcoming trips or arts or whatever, here I am. So thank you, everybody.